I always knew blood didn't guarantee loyalty, but I never expected my own family to prove it so brutally. My name is Elena Vancroft. I was born into what people used to call one of those legacy families' old money, old rules, and a very clear sense of who belonged and who didn't. My father built the Vancroft Group from nothing. He was one of those rare men who could walk into a room and own it without saying a word. People listened when he spoke, and for a long time I did too. He always said the business would be mine one day, not because I was his daughter, but because I earned it. I wasn't just some spoiled heiress waiting for a seat at the table. I earned a double degree in economics and engineering from MIT, got my MBA from London Business School. I worked in Zurich and Singapore and New York, climbing my way up from project management to executive strategy roles. No favors, no shortcuts. I did the damn work. And after all that, I came back home. Because family comes first, or so I thought. When I rejoined the company, I didn't expect a red carpet, but I also didn't expect the silence, the cold shoulders, the thin smiles from my uncles, each of them, sitting comfortably in the boardroom, each of them twice as arrogant as they were competent. To them, I wasn't a rising executive. I was just the girl, the emotional one, the liability in heels. They never said it outright, but they didn't need to. Every suggestion I made in strategy meetings was dismissed as idealistic. Every pitch I prepared was a bit aggressive. Every performance report I delivered met with thinly veiled irritation. It didn't matter that I increased our overseas efficiency by 12% in the first quarter I was back. It didn't matter that I identified 2 redundant supply chain contracts and saved us nearly $4 million. I wasn't one of them, and I never would be. But I stayed, because my father was still there. He had my back. And I believed foolishly that loyalty would win in the end. Then he got sick. Aggressive lymphoma, stage 4. It moved fast, too fast. Within a month, he was too weak to attend meetings. 2 months later, he was hospitalized permanently. And that's when the knives came out. I remember that boardroom, the polished walnut table, the dim, dignified lighting, and a printed agenda titled Governance Transition Planning. It sounded so clinical, so clean, like what they were doing was rational, professional. But I wasn't stupid. I saw it coming. They told me it was time for a leadership restructuring, that it wasn't personal, that the company needed someone with stability, someone less emotionally connected, someone less likely to create tension in the ranks. And then came the line I'll never forget. Of course we want to be fair. That's why we're offering to buy your shares at a premium 15% above current valuation. That's generous, Elena. Generous. They were kicking me out of my father's company and calling it a gift. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just looked at them, those smug, aging men who thought they'd won something. And I said, send me the paperwork. They didn't know what to do with that. They expected a fight, or at least a tear. But I signed the papers the next morning, packed up my office in under an hour, and walked out of the building without looking back. No dramatic exits, no burning bridges, just silence. And a promise I made to myself in the elevator that day. You didn't just lose me, you made me your competitor. I drove home with the windows down, the air cold against my skin. I didn't turn on the music, I just listened to the sound of the wind. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from clarity. It wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about building something they couldn't touch, something they'd never see coming. They thought they were closing a door. They had no idea. I was about to build my own empire with no family name stamped on it. Not because I had to, but because I could, and I would. Quietly, precisely, ruthlessly. And they wanted me out fine. Let's see how they like competing with the woman they underestimated. I didn't fight, not because I was weak, but because I knew I'd win on a different battlefield. The day I walked away from the family business, something inside me went quiet, not broken, just still. For the first few weeks, I barely left my apartment. The silence was louder than I expected. I wasn't grieving a job, I was grieving. The illusion that blood meant something, that effort guaranteed respect. That competence could override gender and politics, it couldn't. Friends called, former colleagues sent messages, You okay? You'll bounce back. You should apply to Bain or Google. I can refer you. I smiled, but I didn't answer. Not because I was lost, but because I already knew I wasn't going back into someone else's system. I had a different plan. I didn't know what it looked like yet, not exactly. But I knew where to start. Information. I opened a fresh notebook and wrote one sentence at the top. How does this industry really work? I spent the next 2 months tearing apart everything I thought I knew about the logistics world. Not from boardroom decks or executive memos, but from the ground up. I interviewed drivers, freelancers, warehouse contractors, boutique retailers struggling to scale. The more I looked, the more I saw. The Vancroft Group was an antique, a polished, overpriced, underperforming relic. They were too big, too rigid, too slow. Their systems were outdated. Their tech stack hadn't changed in 5 years. They still scheduled delivery routes manually in Excel. No predictive models, no automation, no dynamic pricing. They were surviving because of name recognition, not performance. And luxury clients. They were evolving fast. They didn't want pretty PowerPoints. They wanted speed, clarity, precision. They wanted real-time data, live tracking, clean APIs. And no one was giving it to them properly. That was the gap. That was my opening. So I started sketching, not logos, not slogans, systems, architectures, flowcharts. How would I rebuild this entire industry from scratch if I didn't have a legacy to protect? I pulled out old contacts, engineers I worked with in Switzerland, a data scientist from Berlin who once built a warehouse routing algorithm that shaved 18% off delivery times, a front-end dev in Toronto who specialized in customer dashboards that actually made sense. I didn't promise them stock options or fame. I promised them a war worth fighting, a system that worked, a product that mattered. We didn't even have a company name yet, but we had a shared enemy, inertia. And every night when the world went quiet, I stayed up building. Some nights I'd sit cross-legged on the floor of my tiny apartment, surrounded by sticky notes, empty coffee cups, and technical specs scribbled in half English, half code. But I wasn't tired, because this time I wasn't proving anything to anyone. I was building something mine, something lean, something fast, something that could go where legacy couldn't. By month 4, I had a rough prototype, an adaptive logistics backend built with AI-powered route optimization, vendor integration, and live API hooks for merchants. It wasn't pretty, but it worked, and it was smarter than anything my old company had touched in a decade. I remember that night. 3:07 a.m. The only light in my apartment came from my laptop. The blue glow reflected in the window behind me, next to the outline of a city that never looked more full of opportunity. No music, no distractions. Just the quiet hum of something coming alive. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. This wasn't adrenaline. It was focus, pure, calculated focus. While they were busy protecting their board seats and polishing their quarterly reports, I was building the future they never saw coming. And I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it because someone had to. Because the system was broken. And I finally realized I didn't need their permission to fix it. They stripped me of everything except my mind. And that was their first mistake. I didn't have investors. I didn't have a legal team. I didn't even have a company name. But I had a working prototype. And more importantly, I had fire, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't make noise, but burns everything in its path. I called it Orlink. The name came to me one night over black coffee and a half-eaten protein bar. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it sounded like something that listened, learned, connected. And that's exactly what I planned to do. Connect the missing pieces that the old guard never even noticed. Setting it up was painfully slow. I filed the incorporation papers myself, set up a basic website, paid for a business email using my personal credit card. There was no press release, no launch event, just me and a vision. The first few weeks were brutal. I pitched Orling to every boutique luxury brand I could find, small European ateliers, indie Canadian fashion houses, even high-end vegan skincare startups. Most didn't even respond. A few politely declined. Some recognized my name and laughed. Didn't your family run Vancroft? Why would we trust you now? I smiled, And I kept going. You see, rejection doesn't sting when you've already had your soul ripped out in a boardroom full of people who share your DNA. Then something changed. A woman named Celeste, founder of a high-end footwear label in Milan, agreed to a Zoom call. She was cautious, skeptical, but curious. Her brand had been burned by legacy logistics firms too many times. Late shipments, no transparency, expensive as hell. I showed her our live routing algorithm, how we used real-time order clustering and predictive warehouse syncing to cut down delivery time by 23%. She blinked, asked, "Wait, how big is your team?" I said 3.5 if you count my cat. She laughed, and then she said the words that still give me chills. "If it works, I'll sign a 1-year exclusive." No questions asked. It worked. We hit every KPI, reduced her costs, increased her repeat customers. Her buyers loved the live delivery dashboards we built, clean, sleek, branded to her tone. Word started to spread, quietly, under the radar. One boutique told another, then another. But I didn't grow fast. I grew deliberately. Every client had to be aligned. If they wanted speed and efficiency without innovation, we weren't for them. But if they wanted to reshape the way luxury commerce moved, they were our people. At the 6-month mark, I brought in a CTO. An old colleague from Zurich who had once said, "If you ever build something of your own, call me first." I called. He moved to Toronto 2 weeks later. By now, we were 5 people, running operations out of a tiny loft above a coffee shop. No signage, no office receptionist, just focused minds and 18-hour days. We called ourselves the surgical team. No fluff, no noise, just precision. Like a scalpel cutting through an industry bloated by ego and tradition. Meanwhile, Vancroft was still running glossy TV ads and sponsoring golf tournaments. Still too busy admiring itself to notice what was happening at the edge of its territory. But I wasn't trying to beat them yet. Not yet. I was building the machine. And when it was ready, it would run circles around them before they even knew it existed. Funny thing is, no one ever tells you how lonely it is to build in silence. There's no applause at 2 a.m. when you finally fix a deployment bug. No one claps when your API finally integrates cleanly with Shopify or Square or some obscure Belgian payment gateway. But I didn't need applause. I needed momentum. I remember one night vividly. It was snowing outside. The heater in my apartment broke. I was wrapped in 3 layers, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching the Oralink dashboard light up as we processed our first 1,000 package day. The sound of that pinging system notification, better than music, better than any investor pitch or family inheritance. That was the sound of freedom, the sound of something I built on my own terms with no permission, no legacy, no last name behind it. They burned me down, but they forgot something. Some of us rise from ash smarter, faster, sharper, and when we come back, we don't knock. We build the whole damn door. They thought I was gone. I was just getting started. By the end of our first year, Oralink had onboarded 7 boutique luxury brands across Europe and North America. No funding, no flashy announcements, just results. We didn't have a marketing department. We didn't even have social media. But we had numbers, lower delivery failure rates, faster fulfillment times, real-time transparency that made legacy dashboards look like Windows 98. Clients didn't just stay, they referred us like a secret, as if they'd stumbled onto something too good to share openly. And I liked it that way, because in stealth, there's power. The truth was, I wasn't building a logistics company. I was building an intel network. One that moved goods, yes, but more than that, it moved trust. We knew where things were when they'd arrive, and how to make sure clients never had to ask twice. Our system anticipated issues before they became problems. That was our edge. That and the fact that no one saw us coming. Meanwhile, the Vancroft Group kept doing what they always did, existing loudly. Big conferences, big partnerships, big egos. But behind the scenes, I started to hear murmurs. Whispers of frustration from brands who felt neglected. Invoices delayed, deliveries rerouted, warehouses underperforming. They were bleeding not all at once, but little by little. And they didn't know who was taking their market share. Because I wasn't signing with Elena Vancroft, I was just Orlink, and that anonymity, it gave me room to scale like ghost fire. We rebuilt our back end in month 14, turned it into a modular system that could handle 10x volume without human oversight. By month 18, we were automating warehouse routing across 3 time zones, adjusting dynamically to weather customs clearances and even local courier delays. We didn't pitch, we delivered. And still I stayed in the shadows. Sometimes I'd open industry articles about top 10 logistics startups and laugh. We weren't on any of them. But 3 companies on the list were already white labeling our tech. I didn't care about recognition. Recognition is loud, and loud draws attention, and attention draws the people I was trying to outrun. I hadn't forgotten that boardroom, the smug looks, the veiled condescension, the way they tried to erase me with a payout and a signature. But I wasn't chasing revenge. I was chasing something bigger: dominance without noise, control without spotlight. It became an obsession. How much could we grow without ever being seen? I once closed a $2 million contract on Slack. No video call, no handshake, just product screenshots, a pricing doc, and a whisper from a mutual contact. They'll take care of you, quietly. That became our unofficial motto. We'll take care of you, quietly. And our clients loved it. In a world obsessed with going viral, we became the company that never needed to. Of course, the Vancrofts eventually noticed. It started with a dip in their Q2 numbers, then a memo about emerging disruptors, then a rebranding campaign that tried and failed to make them look modern. But no matter how many consultants they hired, they couldn't fix the one thing they'd never understand. Legacy is not a strategy, and when you mistake comfort for competence, you rot from the inside. Still, I didn't engage. No press statements, no interviews, no gloating. I watched from a distance as their empire began to tilt just a few degrees. But in business, a few degrees is all it takes. My team kept growing. We were 22 by year 2. Our Slack channels ran 24/7 across 6 countries. We never used titles, just functions. Everyone knew what needed to be done, and they did it fast. There were days I barely spoke. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't need to. The system was working, the machine was alive, and I had become exactly what I needed to be: invisible, but unstoppable. Our names appeared on the same RFP. That's when I knew it was time. It came in quietly, just a line in an internal Slack thread. A global luxury conglomerate, Orison Ruth, had opened a North American logistics tender. Massive scope, high standards, multi-million-dollar contract. They were modern, data-driven, ruthless about performance. My kind of client. I opened the tender file, scanned the shortlist, and froze for a second. Vancroft Group and us, Orlink, of course. I didn't feel nervous. I felt still, like something inevitable had finally arrived. Should I handle the pitch? My CEO asked. He was good, polished, trusted, but I shook my head. No, I'll take this one. He didn't argue. The presentation was scheduled 2 weeks out. I spent every night refining our deck, not just the visuals, but the logic, the pain points, the gaps no legacy system could patch. We didn't just build faster delivery models, we built smarter ones, self-correcting, adaptive, auditable in real time. I walked into that boardroom in New York with no entourage, no stylist, no family name badge, just me. Black blazer, clean slides, a laptop that held 2 years of proof. The room was glass-walled, sleek, clinical. The Orison Ruth panel sat evenly spaced, polite but unreadable. And then I saw them. The Vancroft team, 3 of them, 1 uncle, a former family friend, and their new head of innovation, someone I had trained when she was still printing reports for me. They saw me, and for a moment the world tilted. Their faces stiffened, eyes wide then narrow. I didn't react. I plugged in my laptop, launched the presentation, looked directly at the clients, not at the ghosts. Good afternoon, I'm Elena, founder of Oralink. We've prepared a 3-phase implementation strategy for your logistics modernization goals, fully mapped to your projected expansion in the US and Canada. Let's begin. No mention of Vancroft, no personal story, just data and performance. I walked them through dynamic fleet allocation, cross-border predictive routing, live anomaly tracking with automatic client alerts. I showed them our case study with Celeste's brand, how we cut fulfillment time by 38% in Q2 alone. I ended with 3 words, "We're already ready." Then I closed the laptop, thanked them for their time, and left the room. I didn't look at the Vancrofts again. I didn't need to, because in that room, they weren't family. They were competitors, and they'd just been outplayed. 2 weeks passed. I didn't follow up, didn't call, just waited. Until one night around 10:42 p.m., I got the email. Subject line award notification, Oralink Inc. We had won. Oralink had secured one of the most high-profile logistics contracts in the luxury sector, beating out Vancroft, beating out half a dozen legacy players. We were the smallest company on the list. We were the newest. We had the least funding. And we'd just knocked out an industry titan. I didn't celebrate. Not the way people expect. No champagne, no team dinner. Just me sitting in my office, reading the contract over and over, every clause like a quiet echo of justice. Not vengeance, just validation. Because here's the thing they never saw coming. I didn't need to burn them down. I just had to build something better and let the market decide, and the market had spoken. Later, I heard rumors that the board held an emergency meeting, that they demanded to know why Vancroft lost to a startup with no brand equity, that someone finally said it out loud because they're faster, they're leaner, and they're actually listening to what clients want. I never confirmed anything, never gave a quote to the press, never even acknowledged the contract publicly. But I knew word would get around. In this industry, victories don't stay quiet for long, especially when they shake foundations. The next day, I walked into the Oralink office, just a converted warehouse loft with 20-something team members, deep in code and logistics maps. No one stopped to cheer. They didn't have to, because we all knew. That was the day we became real. Not in the headlines, not in legacy circles, but in the eyes of the only people who matter, the clients. And for the Vancrofts, that was the day they realized I wasn't gone, I was here, and I wasn't competing in their game anymore. I had rewritten the rules. The empire my grandfather built was now rotting from the inside, and I wasn't going to save it. After we won the Orison Ruth contract, something shifted in the air. Not just for me, for the entire industry. Suddenly, Oralink wasn't that agile newcomer anymore. We were a threat, a verified data-backed client-worshipped threat, and Vancroft felt it. One by one, their contracts began to fall apart. First, the Milan account gone. Then the Canadian jewelry brand moved to us within 30 days. Even long-term deals, the ones they thought were locked, started unraveling. Why? Because clients talk. And logistics is about trust. Once it's gone, no family name can buy it back. Inside their walls, panic was setting in. Emails leaked. Executive meetings became daily. My old office now occupied by someone with 3 times my age, and none of my experience was vacated by Q3. Then came the resignation wave. Their COO left first, citing irreconcilable differences with the board. The CIO followed, then the head of product, and quietly, discreetly, they called me. They didn't beg, they didn't flatter. They simply said, "We believe in what you're building. If there's room for us at Oralink, we'd like to talk." I didn't even pause. Let's schedule interviews. Because in my world, no one skips the line. Not even the people who once stood above me. While they tried to backpedal, restructure, rebrand Oralink kept climbing. By this point, we weren't chasing clients. Clients were chasing us. We had to develop a wait list. We started licensing our software as a standalone product. One investor even called it the Stripe of luxury logistics. I never confirmed or denied it. Labels didn't interest me. Impact did. But the press, they started to notice. The question began popping up in Forbes trade publications and industry expos. Who's behind Oralink? Is it a European fund? Some Stanford dropout? Then one Sunday morning it hit. The expose, a tech journalist from London, published a piece titled "The Heiress They Tried to Erase and the Empire She's Building in Silence." It was meticulous, sourced, verified. A full timeline from my exit at Vancroft to the quiet rise of Oralink. The name Elena Vancroft trended on X for 48 hours straight. Tech Twitter called me the ghost founder who came back from the dead. Women in business groups called it the comeback of the decade. And suddenly, the very people who once wouldn't return my emails were writing articles like why female-led logistics is the future, how legacy kills innovation, the rise of Oralink, what Vancroft should have seen coming. And my family, they reached out, emails, phone calls, even a handwritten letter from my uncle. We misjudged you. Let's not let history get in the way of synergy. Synergy. The word made me laugh. Then came the offer, a strategic partnership, joint branding, shared infrastructure, a potential co-CEO role. I didn't reply, not right away. But a week later, I walked into their boardroom just once more. Not to scream, not to gloat, just to say this isn't about revenge, it's about vision. And your vision doesn't include me. It never did. So no, Oralink will not partner with Vancroft, not now, not ever. They sat there in silence. No one made eye contact. And I walked out. No regrets, no second thoughts. Because the truth is, I never wanted to destroy them. I just wanted to build something honest, something that worked, something that proved you don't have to inherit power to earn it. And now the headlines can say whatever they want. But I'll always remember what mattered most. It wasn't the contracts, it wasn't the press. It was that, after everything they took from me, they had to sit and watch as I built something they couldn't even touch. They invited me to dinner. I almost didn't go. But then I thought, why not? The email was short. We'd love to reconnect. Family dinner this Sunday. Just us. No agenda. Sure, no agenda. Just a table full of people who once orchestrated my erasure. I stared at the message for a long time. At first, I was going to delete it, but something in me said go. Not to forgive, not to play along, just to see. To look them in the eyes and know I didn't need anything from them anymore. So I replied, I'll be there. Sunday came. I wore black. Simple, clean lines, no jewelry, no apology. The dinner was hosted at my uncle's estate. Same manicured hedges, same polished floors, same sense of self-importance that clung to the air like overpriced cologne. As I walked in, they stood one by one. My uncles, my aunts, even a few cousins I hadn't seen in years. Polite smiles, carefully measured hugs, the kind of greetings that reek of performance. They seated me at the center of the table. How symbolic. As if proximity to the carving knife could disguise the past. The first few minutes were filled with small talk. How business was evolving. How the world was changing so fast. And how it's impressive what some people have built out of very little. I just listened, cut my steak, sipped my wine, and waited. Then one of them, my Uncle Robert, leaned back in his chair fork, hovering over his untouched plate. You know, Elena, you've really surprised us, truly. You've done quite well for yourself, but I suppose it makes sense. After all, you are a Vancroft. I looked at him, calm, controlled, and I smiled just slightly. No, I succeeded in spite of this family. Not because of it. Silence. Forks paused midair. Eyes widened just enough to betray the sting. I didn't say it with anger. I said it like a fact, because that's exactly what it was. They didn't reply. No one tried to defend themselves, because they knew. They knew how they voted, how they shut doors, how they smiled while handing me my own exit papers. Now they wanted to rewrite the past into some shared foundation for my success. They wanted to claim me without ever having supported me. But I wasn't something they could reclaim. Dinner resumed awkwardly. Someone changed the subject. Dessert arrived, and the performance continued. I stayed 30 more minutes. I answered polite questions about international logistics, smiled, when someone mentioned Paris and nodded through veiled attempts at flattery. Then I stood up. Thank you for the invitation. I have an early morning. They offered to walk me out. I declined. Outside, the night air was crisp. My driver opened the door. I slid into the back seat and leaned my head against the leather. The car pulled away. The estate grew smaller in the rearview mirror, and I didn't feel anger, or pain, or triumph. I felt free, utterly, completely free. No more seeking approval, No more wondering what could have been. No more unfinished conversations. I had walked into that dinner with nothing to prove, and I walked out knowing that nothing they said or didn't say mattered anymore. They were relics, preserving a version of power that had already crumbled. And me, I was the woman they couldn't see, becoming real. The one they thought they buried. The one who no longer fit into the legacy. Because she built something larger than it. Not an inheritance, an identity. The car glided down the highway, city lights rising in the distance. And for the first time in years, I exhaled. Not from exhaustion, but from release. I didn't set out to destroy them. I just stopped waiting for their permission. 3 years later, Oralink is one of the top 5 luxury logistics companies in North America. Our systems run across 4 continents. We process over 70,000 packages a day, seamlessly and visibly. Brands trust us not because of who we are, but because of what we've built. We never needed a legacy. We built a living machine. And it works. Clients don't care that I was once pushed out of a family boardroom. They care that their products arrive on time, beautifully tracked, and backed by data they can actually use. And the industry, they don't whisper anymore. They watch. I was recently named Tech Visionary of the Year. It's one of those shiny glass trophies people like to take pictures with. There was a gala, spotlights, the usual speeches. When they called my name, I walked up, smiled. For the cameras took the mic and said exactly 11 words, "Thank you to my team. You're the only legacy I need." Then I walked off stage. Because at some point you realize the win isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about building something so right that nothing they said could ever matter again. These days I live simply. I still work. Early mornings, late nights, by choice, not survival. My apartment's bigger now, but my world is quieter. And when I look back at it all, I don't feel anger. I don't even feel pride. I feel clarity. That every insult, every locked door was redirection. They didn't end me, they freed me. Because the truth is, if they hadn't forced me out, I might have stayed. I might have played it safe, tried to fit into a mold that was never designed for someone like me. But they made their choice, and I made mine, to build, to lead, to create something they couldn't copy, because they could never understand it. Oralink isn't just a company, it's proof that sometimes the system fails on purpose, to make sure you stop trying to fix it and start replacing it. My family still operates, smaller now, quieter, some of them retired, some still pretending the market hasn't moved on. I wish them well, truly, because I don't carry that weight anymore. It's not revenge, it's not rage, it's release. And freedom, I've learned, isn't loud. It's walking into your own office on your own time, surrounded by people who believe in what you're building because you built it. Not because of your name, not because of your blood, but because of your work. And maybe that's what real power is. Not the title, not the spotlight, but the quiet confidence of knowing you didn't just survive, you designed the world that was supposed to reject you and made it better. So no, I didn't set out to ruin them. I just refused to shrink for their comfort. And I'll leave you with this. Sometimes the best thing they can do for you is underestimate you. Let them.